Okay, so here we go. This is study number 15. And let me see here. This drawing, I started this out with just a basic profile, and one of the things that I liked right away was these sort of, the horns curving on the top of the head a little bit. Now, I wasn't sure how big that main horn was going to be. I do try and establish the eye and kind of the jaw right away a lot of times. It gives him sort of a personality. And this guy, he develops into what looks like a big toughy kind of dragon. But again, I like the sets of horns that are turning outward and then inward on the top of the head. I thought that was kind of neat. As I start to draw these, you can see, I mean, with the horns especially, they're just round, they're variations on cylinders. So the first thing is just to get some shadow on both sides. The detail and the little pits in the horns and the scratches and all that kind of stuff, that's a neat detail to add, but that's something that I usually think of at a little more later stage. At first, I'm really just trying to make these things seem round and get the neck established, the jaw established. I wanted to go with a larger scale pattern on him rather than the smaller kind of linked pattern that I do quite a bit. He sort of reminds me of a little more of a Godzilla-like dragon. I don't know why. I think it's the lower jaw. So, again, as I'm working around these things, now I've got the patterns of those scales laid in on the neck, and you can see where I just kind of go in and get a little shadow on the bottom, and right away that starts to give that neck a little bit more form. And it's really just indicators at this phase. Again, I've said this before, but I'm not trying to do a pencil rendering because I'm going to take this to oil paint at some point, and I know that the real control and the values can be done there. Okay, now again we've got this guy mounted down to the board, took the pencil sketch and mounted that down, scanned it in, mounted an archival version of that down to the board. This is Masonite, which is almost exclusively what I work on. I do work on wood panels every once in a while, but the Masonite is just stable, it's affordable, it's easy to cut and deal with. So I use it quite a bit. Now with this guy, I'd done a few of these at this point, so I just wanted to try to do something a little different. So I thought about doing sort of a horizontal band of light color through this, and in doing that, it inspired me to lay in a two color sort of pattern on the dragon himself. Again, a lot of times I'm not sure why I think like this a lot, but it feels like the belly and the neck should be a different color or a different value than the rest of the dragon. I don't know why that sticks in my head, but it does. It doesn't have to be that way, but of course it is something that I think I do quite a bit. It makes them look more natural to have some pattern established on them. And now with the underbelly here, one of the things I'm able to do, even with this limited palette, is I'm working with the dark burnt umber and white and mixing. I mixed a step in between those two colors without going through the burnt sienna. So it turns out to be a much cooler set of colors. transition. So it really does look like two different colors because, I mean, it is, one is definitely more influenced by the sienna, that being the top reddish color of him. So again, as you can see, I can still, not so much on the underneath, but on the redder, browner part, I can still see a good bit of my line drawing, the pencil drawing through it. And I'm using that as a guide. And the original drawing, again, I'm sure is off camera, and I'm referring back to it also, just in case I do, happen to obliterate an area in this and I need to kind of see what I was thinking. And again, that's something else I really like about this method, is that I'm not destroying the drawing to do the painting. I actually wind up with two products, so I think that's great. Now again, with this, and I love my favorite trick there, to turn this thing upside down, just to get in and clean up some of the edges. Now, I'll be in there again, but this is really a pass where I'm focusing more on the brush work in that background tone than anything else. My only goal with the dragon, what I'm doing with him as far as chiseling out the negative space, is I'm just trying not to make a mess of him. I'm going to come back and probably make another pass at those horns with a smaller round later on, but for right now I'm really focused more on the patterning and the brush work, so to speak, in that background tone. It's sort of the artsy part of the painting for me. It's something that's a little looser and just based more on personal taste than on any kind of academic approach or a system that's in play. And now here, we start to get into really cleaning up these edges. A lot of times too, I notice that the tips, I try and go for like a darker, more of a black coloration at the tips of the horns themselves, and I think that lends a natural quality to it. It really depends on what your observations of different animals are. They're just small elements of colorings of different creatures that I try and employ here, things that exist in nature, that I try and employ with these, that give them a little more of a realistic quality, so that everything, is not a candy apple red dragon or something. You really, I prefer to try and make them feel like, almost like dinosaurs that never existed. I've mentioned that to somebody, and that seemed to be a great way to describe my take on dragons and my dragons in nature, approach. Even though these could be dragons in nature. These are, again, like I've said, they're really just concept studies for any kind of dragon themselves, different horn arrangements and things like that. They could be I could put them in any environment down the road. Now you can see where just laying in that value of the burnt sienna to give it sort of that rusty reddish color was just that, and just the outline of the darks got me about 60 or 70% of the way there. And then I just start pecking in a few of these little highlights, and before you know it, it really comes to have a very realistic form to it. Sometimes there's, trial and error that doesn't work out, that has to be fixed. I want to try and stress, especially in oil paint, I think people are intimidated by it, but it's a very correctable medium. You can always wipe out things, let it dry and paint over them. I've had quite a bit of experience with it, but to me, it's one of the most correctable mediums out there. Next to digital, it's maybe the most correctable, at least for me. And here we go. Now we're really in it here. Anytime I'm doing little dots of white, little gleams of white, we're pretty much on the finish pass. And this guy's looking pretty good. May need a few things just to be blended down, but again, at this stage, the whole painting is wet, so that's pretty easy to do.